Hey Dylan.
Hey, Mike.
Dylan, normally at this time we talk about the Sunburn gaming engine.
Yes, we do.
Um, Not gonna talk much about the Sunburn gaming engine. It's out there, go get it. The thing is that uh our window of sponsorship, we talked about it last week. I think it's up on that. And I didn't follow up with those guys to find out what they want to do going forward.
Is this like your attempt to communicate with them through the ad spot? Like, is this the equivalent of a billboard that says, your ad here?
No, no, no. I don't think it's offering for other ads here.
Well, no, but just directed at them.
Well, I just setting up to explain.
It's a complex metaphor.
It's not. It's just to set up and explain the technology cooperative.
Okay.
And the technology cooperative is a nonprofit organization that is aimed at raising technology awareness and exposure, aimed mostly at kids and underprivileged kids, kids that do have kids that aren't underprivileged as well, but getting kids more engaged in STEM, science, technology, mathematics, engineering, so that we get more engineers, scientists, technologists. I don't know. Developers, what the hell? Mathematicians, because, we need that. And our school system isn't doing a great job at turning out the careers that we need. And all of these careers require a bit of passion, a bit of spark of interest, which I think the kids will have. They just need the exposure to what really goes on. What can you do? What's it like to build a robot? What's it like making a game? And that kind of stuff. So that's the mission of the technology cooperative. And the Sunburn ad, the reason that this ties together is, we agreed to do Sunburn advertisements if they made in exchange for them making a donation to the technology cooperative. So we didn't, GameMarx, Funkworks, we didn't take any money, for, these ads that we do. We asked that, hey, this is something that's important to us. It's something that we've supported, that Funkworks has made donations to each year. And, we just said, hey, it's important to us. Rather than pay us for the ads, make a donation. And, as a company, it's a 501c3 organization. They get to write it off. So there's a tax benefit, versus giving us the money. If they get, having them give it directly to, the technology cooperative. If this is something you're interested in, you'd like to support, like to back, as I said, us Funkworks are big involved in it. We have several other members of the community that are big and involved in it. By far, I'm not the only one that are getting this off. The technology cooperative also, besides running programs, we're gonna try to host and pull off our current one is Earn a Computer, where the kids will come in for 3 Saturdays, 6 hours a Saturday, 3 in the morning, 3 in the evening. They'll get a class on a computer. So, I'll be teaching Scratch programming, using the MIT Scratch software and programming. There'll be other stuff on there of using, the open source Office equivalents, not teaching them how to use a Word document, PowerPoint, but how to save that in Office format so you can turn in your assignments, using OpenOffice instead of, Microsoft Office. And, basic computer security 101, audio production recording, graphics design on the computer. Just give them exposure, each one of these classes. And at the end, the kid goes through all 6 of the courses across the 3 Saturdays. They get the computer. The computer goes home with them. It's a donated computer, so it's an Earn a Computer program, for some kids who, maybe the family has a computer, but it's like the family computer in the room. And I think I'm a believer in letting the kids have their own computer in their room, and that they can do anything with. And, it's they don't have to worry about if it's broken or something happens to it or the software messes it up, because dad's not going to get upset or mom's not going to get upset if they can't get in there and check email or something like that. It's theirs to experiment and play with, much the same way that I got computers to experiment and play with growing up. So, that's just one of the programs that we do, but we also host, So other groups, we have a WordPress meetup group that meets down there. The Knoxville Game Design group meets there. So there is space that we make available to other community groups as well. If you're interested in checking that out, the URL on that is techco, techco.org. And one of our proud sponsors of TechCo is the guys at synapsegaming.com. All right, everyone, welcome to the show. This week, topic of the week is smashing shit into other shit. Finding out if shit's gonna smash out into other shit. Knowing before something is smashed into something that it's going to smash into something. Collision detection.
Yep.
Collision detection. And I suggested this to you earlier in the week because on Xtiled, our tiled map editor, XNA importer, which, by the way, Levi, GA Tech Grad, is in the chat, who has started a new platforming game, tile-based, and yet is not using Xtiled. I can't reach them, Dylan. I try to reach the kids, and I can't reach them.
It's always easier to come up with your own solution than
sometimes it's fun.
Solution. Like, I'm not sure that considering you just rewrote TiledLib, essentially, you can go, I can't believe these people aren't using our library.
I'm saying the guy who came to the Knoxville Game Design meetup group where I went over the library. He said he downloaded it. Okay, we'll accept that. Yay. We have something. He's one of the 5, I think. Well, and I don't expect a lot of downloads because it's not the kind of thing that you did massive downloads on there. But so V1, what's out with a binary release? If you grab the binary release, if that's what you downloaded, then yes, what you have is something that loads up. It has some significant differences in the way that it loads the map up from TiledLib that we covered last show. Yeah. But it pretty much just loads up the map and then has a render method for draw a map, and that's where it stops. You have access to all the data in the editor, but it's not doing anything much more than the basics of presenting that to you. Now, this past week, I've been really busy on the features that I want to build in. So, I plan to, in the next week or so, get busy on a platformer. Get busy making a platformer. And no, that's not Captain Dubstep. As I've said several times, I'm not convinced that we should further invest time into Captain Dubstep at the moment. I think Captain Dubstep makes the mistake, the common mistake for beginning game developers of basing a game around a mechanic instead of a complete game picture. And we don't have a complete game picture. Captain Dubstep is out of a mechanic.
Well, eventually that evolved, but I think, and like I said earlier this week, like the vision for what that was, both the mechanic and kind of the world, you were trying to set up, is, like it's so far beyond. Well, it's not beyond, I guess. The best way to say it.
It was made up as I went along.
It was, but I think it's too ambitious.
There's not an overreaching. There was not a design goal when we started out of what the game was. It was a mechanic. It was make the gun go wub wub wub. That was it. It was a joke that we did in a podcast, and everything else since then has been making shit up as I go along. It's like, okay, why are you getting a gun that goes wub wub wub? Oh, maybe because you're on a moon base in a Metroidvania type game. Hey, like, what should you be fighting? I don't know. Let's dubstep. How about heavy metal? That's funny. Let's make it against heavy metal. And that's why it's feature creep. That's why it's all over the place, is because there's not a design goal. There never was.
I think part of the problem, especially as we started working on it, was not like it was never going to match up to like yes, this is going to look like metal, this is going to feel like metal, this is going to feel like dubstep even, you know. The mechanics are going to be so integral to, like, they turned out not to be as integral as we thought they were.
Well, part of the problem there is that as we floundered around and did design as we went, we just made up and added as we went, we didn't have a cohesive design of like, okay, this is the emotions we want the player to have, this is the experience we are attempting to create, so all things come in concert with that. It was like, well, shit. Well, we gotta start out, and we can't just give everybody all this stuff or we have no game. Because again, we don't have an overarching experience or design doc or anything that we're working from. Yeah, so we're gonna meter out the power-ups. We're just gonna do it by the numbers.
Oh yeah,
and crank out a game. And so now it's like, well, okay, you'll get the what gun later, and we'll introduce the time manipulation mechanics as we go on, and we'll use them as ways to meter out the difficulties of the levels. I do agree
that we kind of like, we had this idea that we wanted time manipulation, but exactly what that wasn't quite there. But also, like, I noticed as we were working on the game, like, this being our first real platformer, we were both trying to figure out what the mechanics needed to be. At the same time, we were trying to figure out how to code mechanics in a game. And so we were so focused on...
I don't know, maybe you got hung up because we did Spriter and we did some things later that you break into that, but I had the platforming basics working in less than a week.
Yeah, like, I'm not saying the basics, but I'm saying like when we brought in enemies, when we brought in new weapons, it was kind of like, well, it's got to do this, and especially with the enemies, like they had to kind of have their whole state sequence.
Yeah, I mean maybe because like again, you're mostly on our project's lead coder guy, right? And you might see it that way, but it's like any of our projects are going to have like those coding issues. Yeah. The problem is that there's no reason why we need enemies to work one way versus another. Like there's no like, okay, the enemies are this way and they work this way and this is how they should behave, that you can then sit back and look at that and go, okay, well, we know what all the enemies are going to have and how the enemies are going to behave, so I can make a system that's going to accommodate that. What you're experiencing is project mismanagement 101. What you're experiencing is, I don't know what the fuck. I need some enemies on the screen to shoot at. Okay, I coded you up some enemies on the screen to shoot at. Oh, well, now I want them to jump. Well, now I want to ride on top of them. Now I want to do that. And it's like, the assumptions you made with it complete docs.
Like I said, I think it's multiple things. It's not just that we didn't have a vision, but
I think the reason that I'm not letting this off the hook, and I'm not letting you get away here with your point of like, oh, it's not all just a vision thing, is that large games. This is the problem, and this is the problem with a lot of games. This is like 25% of the extra credit episodes boil down to like not planning this stuff out, not thinking like, what am I trying to do here? How am I trying to do it? And more importantly, what experience do I want the gamer to have when they sit down? Like, what emotions do I want to put them through? Now, whereas flip over to Rocks, okay? I have so many beats out and so many... They're not even story points. They're more like moments.
Yeah.
Like, I have moments, and the reason I don't even talk about this game is, like, I have moments that we based upon a reveal. I have characters, not completely written out and fleshed out, but I have ideas on my characters, of their background, what they come from, why they do what they do. And I'm not just talking about like the main characters in the main plot. I'm talking about like, sub characters coming in, and like when we get back to a story episode, this would be a good topic. But the idea is that you don't write stories. What you do is you write deep and descriptive characters, and you figure out their background and why are they doing it, what are they thinking, what are their heads, how do they react to stuff, and you flesh out this person, and then you throw these people into a situation now, and then the story unfolds because like the reader or the player may not know all the background behind this person, but you do. And so you know kind of what these people are going to do in these situations that you put them through. And then that also gives you the other popular thing that comes up on extra credits all the time, Indas Meus.
In medias res?
In medias res. Start in the middle. You know, like you can totally do that once you have all this worked out, because it's easy to go forward and backwards, and you know that's the action part. You want to start people in the middle in a game, and
you're not tied to that one little
Captain
scene in the
Dubstep
beginning.
never had that. Captain Dubstep only had a gimmick, and then Dream Build Play came up, and it was like the easiest thing on the shelf that looked like on the shelf to grab and go with, because you know it was just kind of gimmick. Now,
yeah, well, I guess my point though is that I think to do good game development, you do have to be able to improvise a little bit, not completely, not like improvise a vision out of thin air. But I think we were, for the level of improvisation that was required, we had nowhere near the experience to do it.
See, the difference is, the difference of this is like ad-libbing a line in the movie. That's really, I was like, oh, that's a kick-ass line, you know?
Yes.
Or adding that line like Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones. Crap, I can't remember. There's a killer line in one of the Indiana Jones thing, and it's an ad-lib. It's a Harrison Ford ad-lib or something like that. And it's like, oh man, that is such an iconic, like, that's exactly, and that's because he was in the role of the character.
About the one about the teacher?
I don't even remember.
What is it?
It's like, what do you do other than this? It's like, I'm a teacher. And he says it in just the right way.
Or something.
That was one of those ones. I remember that one because they were talking about that one recently.
But the ad-lib, it's different.
So there's a difference with that, and whose line is it anyway?
Yes.
Which whose line in it anyway is 90% painful to watch, 10% hilarious.
I like Wade.
Yeah, I know. There's some people who are clearly better at it than others. You don't, like the 20-year acting veteran, yeah, he can probably get away with ad-libbing. The guy that, has been waiting tables, waiting for his big break.
Did you watch any of the Tim Schafer? Have you been watching any of the Tim Schafer behind the scenes?
Nope.
He fills notebooks before he starts on his game.
Right.
He does writing exercises, free-flowing writing exercises. So he, takes his notebook. He's got this notebook. He's got notebooks from all his games. And, Grim Fandango, he goes 20 pages in before he has the setting in that notebook. He just sits down with his notebook and starts writing. And it's always crap at the beginning. It's like, well, I'm starting to write another notebook now. I had tuna for lunch. I think, tuna's kind of cool. I don't know if tuna could fly. Maybe, just free flow writing. 20 pages in, something emerges that he comes back to and he puts a star by, and then he starts writing on I like what I wrote on page 20. That gives me an idea. And then he, and then by the end of one of these composition notebooks, this thing is filled. He's got an idea for a game. And then he goes to the team with I have an idea for a game. The adventure game, right? The idea for the game is there's a boy and a girl cosmically linked, but starting at separate ends of the universe and almost entirely separate different games. But both point-and-click adventures, but completely different styles of point-and-click adventures. And, they're gonna, converge and meet up, and, where he came out with this stuff, I was like, that's really fucking good. It's really, there's you sit down, so, what are you gonna do when people want a retro point-and-click adventure? To give them a retro point-and-click adventure, that's new. And then you just watch this process, and you're like, holy shit, the whole idea of, these two characters that are linked, this boy and a girl, and they're going to come together at some point, but, and all of that, and, watching it, I'm like, man, that's really good. So when they're sitting down now, and they're having the discussion of, what enemies do we add and all of that, there's a very strict framework in place now of, what we're grafting this on, and what the player is going to experience, because, he went out on, and he even, the boy lives on a spaceship by himself. so it's going to be steel and cold and, the art assets will be like this kind of stuff and all that. So, I mean, he didn't explicitly say, like, we're going to go with pixel art or anything like that,
Yeah.
or have any concepts. But the team has a very solid vision now of what they're doing and
Yeah. Well,
why, more importantly, why they're doing it. What's in his head that he's trying to create, the vision that he has, he's got it out now on paper, and then you can go on there. And then when you say, like, oh, okay, well, we're working on this part and this puzzle here with the Space Boy, wouldn't you think it'd be better if we did this, instead of A or B?
Well, you figure out what your important decisions are, and the decisions that are important, like you said, is it what style of art, pixel art versus whatever. For some games that may be important, for some games it may not, and you have to define that on the outset. But, okay, you make a good point, though, as far as, like, vision, like, just thinking about, like, it started out, this was going to be a Mega Man game, and then it became a Metroid game, and it makes, like, those sorts of decisions make sense if you're just throwing stuff out.
Yeah,
and
they all made sense at the time.
In retrospect, it's hard, at the moment, it's hard to tell if this is just idea number 2 in the, the brainstorming list, or no, this is the idea.
Right. Which I think we've thrown out better. We never sat down with Captain Dubstep. We did the mobile game that we're not developing right now, but the mobile game, we got pretty far in, like, how we thought this thing should play and feel and work, so that we didn't get down to UI or interface. We had sketches, but
we knew as long as we kept the rules simple that we could, we
had guiding principles of, like, simple rules, in and out, how expansions could work. Like, we had some guiding principles that then, when you get down to it, you wouldn't be making changes like we did from Mega Man to Metroid.
But the problem is we never got far enough to, like, start testing those and tweaking those, which is really how far you have to get.
That's when the improvisation comes in, and the ability to change is when you, like, get up the concept and the prototype, and then you play it, and you're like, okay, this is not... Because you have that list to go back to. You have that... We said this had to be simple. It's not. I gave it to a new person to play, and explained it to them for 30 minutes before they got into it. And, okay, we gotta fix that. So how do we fix that? Because it was important that this be simple. And we would have had that to go back to. Now, all that said, the platform I'm going on is a quick throwaway, 2-3 month project.
Actually not a bad idea, considering that, Captain Dubstep, our first platformer, and a lot of these problems would have been resolved, I think, if we had a little more under our belts.
Well, technically, I think it doesn't matter. I think technically we would just have solved whatever we came up with.
Yeah.
The bigger scope is that we would have had a better time had we had a guiding document. And at this point, the mechanic is an interesting idea, and it may surface as, like, a stage in this other one. And then there you go. There's your Captain Dubstep. There's the gun that goes wub 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 to some dubstep. In this other one. Now the point for this platformer, though, like after all that of, like, you have this guiding vision, and now I'm saying, like, nah, I really don't. I got some basic stuff up, but it's to get a platformer up using Xtiled.
Yeah.
Because the features, connecting this all the way back around now, Inception, we're coming back a level now. The features that I'm adding, I'm thinking through, like, what would be useful to a platformer beyond, here's the code that renders the map. And of course the first one is collision detection.
Yeah.
And to that effect, what I've added already, to Xtiled is, polygon collision. So the polygons have intersects and contains methods, just like rectangles do in X and A. So that if you want to go into a tiled map editor and just draw a polygon that represents the collision zone or safe zone or however you want to do your level, you could do that. And then have the same kind of algorithm that you would use for a rectangle. So I'm doing that. to see if there's collision on that. I'm doing intersections with lines. Of course, contains a line's not going to contain another shape. A line is just a line. So I've got that in there. I'm going to look at returning some methods. So you may want to do your collision based upon tiles in the map, not shapes that you draw or something like that. So I'm going to look at a method that says, hey, give me all the tiles in this region, because those are the ones I have to go through and check. I thought about, like, maybe you pass in an object and I do the collision on that side. But, you know, I'm trying to draw that line of, like, what's the job of X-tiled and what's the job of the game. Yeah. And what an X-tiled makes too many assumptions about your game that I can't put it in. So, on the main topic of collision detection, in the 3D world, this is actually kind of simpler, I think, personally. Because nobody in the 3D world does actual mesh collision, right? Where they actually take the shape itself and collide it. First of all, the performance hit on that is crazy. You know, you figure out how many triangles are on a mesh, and to go through all that to represent that volume in three-dimensional space and find out if something is inside or outside of it.
And it might just be a matter of expectation because it is so much more complicated.
I think they might have been Heavy Rain, but that would have been the only one. No. What they do is you use spheres. Right. So, and even that's kind of a... It's not like you have to render the sphere or anything. You have a point, say the center of the model, and then you have the radius. And if the point, you take the item location and its distance to the center of the mesh or the object, right? And if that distance is less than the radius of the bounding sphere, you have a collision.
Which is insanely easy to calculate because it's distance between
it's just
points.
Distance and then the value. And if you have two 3D objects, then you usually have two bounding spheres. So you have then the distance between their two center points, the location of the 3D objects.
Has to be radius plus radius.
And then, yes, add the radiuses together. And if the radii are less than the distance, then you have a collision. And when you need finer grain, let's just say that your object, is a mech, it's not going to be well represented by a sphere, because there's going to be a lot of dead space in front and behind of it. It's the head or the foot will be fine, but that'll be there. What you have on the mesh then is actually on the skeleton, usually on the bones, you have attached smaller collision spheres. And so when you pop the big bubble, then you run through the list of all the little ones and do the same check again. And then you can even get that down finer if you want. But nobody does actual, polygon mesh collision, because you can build that into the model data for all these bounding sphere collision objects.
Again, I think it's kind of expected because 3D is that complicated that, you're going to have multiple bounding spheres. I think one of the problems we had with Captain Dubstep was we started out with, for example, pixel-based collision.
Well, before we get there, finishing up 3D. Now, XNA gives you a couple other options, too. So let's say you have a wall. That would be a lot of spheres to make that behave right, and so there's actually a bounding box, and there's also a bounding funstrum in XNA as well. So that check is a little more expensive to call collision on a bounding box, which is why you wouldn't put, say, a box around the mech, even though it would be a much tighter collision zone. It's going to be a more expensive check. Do it with the spheres. Then go down to the box, maybe, if you don't want to do spheres over that. But in cases like a wall, there would be so many spheres to check that it would be worth it. So just go ahead and take the big hit and do the box. And then, of course, a funstrum is kind of like your camera box type thing.
Kind of like a...
Yeah, it's used by the framework to determine what's in the camera and what's out of the camera, what's beyond the clipping plane and what's within the clipping plane. But you could also use that as well if you had an irregular shape, some kind of three-dimensional trapezoid is what a funstrum really is. and that you could, size that up. That's probably pretty rare, I think, to get in to use that one. But you do have those options. But that's kind of 3D collision. And I think that's pretty universal. I know we talk a lot of XNA and C#. I think it's kind of universal of any platform that we were using in 3D of how that's done. Now, so 2D. You alluded to this a little bit. The easy 2D collision is just using rectangles, right? So kind of like, or you could do your own circle calculations as well, which would be bounding spheres.
Yeah.
You can even use the bounding sphere class in 2D. There's no harm against it. You just lock the Z plane, so use the X and Y values, and you got your calculations. So you could use spheres and you can use rectangles in XNA fairly easily. Now, that doesn't always get you the degree of fidelity that you want in 2D on collisions. And we went down the path of pixel-based collision. And Forrest McCorkle of Chaos Soft Games said it best at our game design meetup group is pixel-based collision sounds great until you do it.
Well, it sounds like, well, this will save, our level design an extra step. Like, there's no way... and it's one less thing to go wrong. Like, oh, I forgot to put a bounding box there. So it's deceptively simple. There are... I've read... I believe when I was working on some collision detection in Captain Dubstep, or when we were having problems with pixel-based collision, I did look at several different articles on ways to do it, and of course they talked about bounding spheres and bounding circles, bounding rectangles. I think there was also an article, I want to say it was by the guys who developed McKids, like the NES game that was like McDonald's, where they said they did something like pixel-based collision, like they used like 4 to 6 reference points on the character sprite, and then detected, where that fell. The problem you run into there is, I think even in the scheme they were using, they had to mark certain tiles as being certain types of things, so it was even a little more complicated than what we were doing, but there are kind of middle ground solutions between straight up pixel-based collision and just using rectangles and circles.
So, the problems with pixel-based collision is that you do these little tile objects, and, we experience this with Captain Dubstep, is then your guy gets hung up on pixels, right? Yeah. A pixel can cause a collision, and if you don't have a smooth edge on every tile, which you don't want, 'cause that doesn't look appealing, in most graphic styles, you understand as a developer why he's caught on that pixel, but to a gamer, it looks like, he's caught up on nothing.
Actually, sometimes you don't, as a developer, understand, like, because there were some bugs we ran into that...
but if you do go into pixel-based collision...
Yeah.
The way you need to do it, especially in XNA, is there's get texture, get data. On a texture, you can call get data, which returns an array of color data that is sized to whatever the texture is. So assuming you have red, green, blue, and alpha, you would check the alpha values, and, if something was transparent, then it would, whatever threshold of transparency that you set, because, I think in Captain Dubstep, I said anything of any transparency. If it was slightly transparent, then it was pass-throughable. If it was only 100% opaque was, colliding. But that call is expensive to get that data. So what I actually did was I got that out and then built an identical sized array of Boolean values. So basically a bit array. And then toggled them on true false if that was a opaque pixel or a transparent pixel. True if it's transparent. Or true if it's a opaque pixel.
Basically doing all your processing up front.
And then I did that in our load content method, so we're done, and then we have this really fast lookup table to compare the textures against each other. The issues we ran into. One, first of all, that was very fast. We did that. We did that 60 frames a second. It was fast. It was fine.
It was fast. Or there were a couple of issues we ran into where it would just like bog down the Xbox. I think that was like what the death knell was on that.
Well, no. Sorry, hold on. Let me get it all out because that was something different that caused that. The pixel collision detection was fast. It was done. It was working solid. That wasn't the problem. The problem is that the player doesn't move 1 pixel at a time. The player is going to move like 5 pixels in a frame, 3 pixels in a frame. And when you get to a collision, the default, right, you might do in pixel-based collision, the default like, oh, well, I have 2 states for the player. One, the state he is in, and then the other is the state I want him to go to. Test the state I want him to go to. If the state I want him to go to collides, then just ignore it and put him back in the state he was in. The problem is that the state he was in was hovering 3 pixels off the ground. But he falls 5 pixels a frame. So every frame he falls 5 pixels, collides by 2, and then we undo the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then so where we got into trouble was trying to optimize backing him back out 3 pixels, figuring out the deltas, and then coming back out. And we also had the delta problem of he may not just be colliding in the y-axis. He could be colliding in the y-axis and in the x-axis. He could be colliding just in the x-axis. So you could back out of the x-axis and then be fine from the y.
Yeah.
You could back out from the y, but then collide with the x. And we ended up going through the loop more times than we should have.
Yeah.
So that's where we got into trouble.
I think we actually hacked it where he was pulling you out from the y-axis. The y-axis and x-axis movement were separate things. And that always bugged me, coming in as a business developer because I want that solution to scale up. And that solution only works, when you're talking about calling it 60 frames a second in very small increments. But yeah, like that killed our performance.
Because we ended up doing collision detection 5-6 times a frame. Because we then, when you collided with the X, what we did was we backed out 1 pixel at a time and then retested the collision.
Yeah. And there's no magic method you can use like there is with, rectangles and spheres and things like that, where you can say, show me the most efficient way, intersection of these 2 points.
Right,
show
because
me where
you don't
these
have,
2 bounding boxes
at this point, you don't have regular shapes anymore. You're dealing with pixels. So, and there's a lot of appeal. It sounds good. It sounds like you want pixel-based collision, but you really don't, right? And where you may want to use pixel-based collision is, say, a laser.
Yeah.
Something that once it collides, its state is done, right? You don't have to reposition it. So, like, when you get shot, oh, you just got hit. There's no repositioning that. And then you also have pixel perfect detection on getting shot, because players hate getting shot by a bounding box.
Anything that is going to make the controller or player throw the controller at the screen is probably where you want.
Like that didn't hit me. Like I think Mega Man 3, as I'm playing and I'm in the final stage of it, like there definitely feels like some points where I'm getting hit and I'm missing platforms that I am totally on. Like, to me, it looks like I am completely on that platform, but he falls through it, like he was off of it. It's weird that happens in 3, and I never felt that problem in 2. I don't know what they might have changed in 3 that caused that issue.
I'm almost certain Mega Man's a bounding box, because he's so...
But in 3, like maybe he was a bounding box in 2, but in 3 they tighten up that bounding box. So like, he's now like determined by like a middle point or something, whether he's on the ledge or off the ledge. Versus before, you could be like a toe on the ledge and like just out there with like 1 pixel of a toe on the ledge and you're fine.
Muscles in that foot.
Yeah. So that can cause frustration. So. Forrest, again, back to the Chaos stuff, guys, mentioned that in Evil Quest, and what they're working on in Evil Quest 2 that they've gotten great performance out of, is they kind of hybrid the two, and they take their tile, which they're doing 16 by 16 tiles, and they divide it into 4 sections, 4 subtiles. And then they come up with a value for each one of those subtiles of whether it collides or not. Okay? So, you can have a 45-degree tile that you're not going to have any problem with, and they look at each quadrant and determine if that's a collision quadrant or not. And I think they were setting it explicitly. So they weren't opening up texture data, counting the number of transparent pixels versus the number of opaque pixels, and then saying, okay, there's more than one than the other. It's a quadrant that's transparent. I think they were setting it in the graphics data, in the tile data of what quadrants do on that. But then they had they had a sub-tile collision detection system. It's not crazy. It's not the pixel level, but it does give you some advantage of being able to have a player not get stuck on the corner of a tile or something that's rounded, because you're doing, you got a rounded square, you got a rounded corner, but because you're doing rectangle collision, you get caught on that corner. So that, I think, is a really good advanced way, to split the difference here between effectiveness and ease of implementation.
And the funny thing again is, when you're just heading into it, you want to find these magic solutions because you've got all the data. You should be able to figure out from the pixel data what these game elements should do. And I assume the same philosophy works in things like AI and pathing, where you just assume, well, I've got all the data, I could figure out the best solution for this. But really, when you're designing your levels, you have to add that extra bit of work and define things a little more explicitly to actually get them to work just perfectly.
So, I think that pretty much wraps up what we could cover on collision detection in a podcast.
Yeah.
If you're interested in the polygon collision detection methods, which that I did, there's a trick to polygon collision detection by taking the point that you're interested in seeing if it collides. Well, if you're interested in seeing if the point is inside or outside of a polygon, and take that point, project a horizontal line through the rest of the polygon. If that line intersects an odd number of walls, you're inside. If it intersects an even number of walls, you're outside. So I basically found a site that had the math formulas for that worked out, and then some people had submitted code examples, one in C, and then I found a Stack Overflow post where they had taken that C and the answer, took that C and converted it to C#. The guy that implemented it in C#, and I left a comment on that Stack Overflow of like, hey, it's not quite right, left out some lines that were critical. So I looked back at the original C function and added them back in. Also on the same math site, I found like calculating where 2 lines intersect. Because if I can get a point where 2 lines intersect, then the lines intersect, and then if there's no intersection value, then they don't intersect. And then from that, I was able to build up the rest of, because a rectangle is a series of 4 lines. It's also a collection of 4 points, so I could determine intersects and contains methods and provide overloads after that. So you can take a look. I mean, if you go to Bitbucket and you go to Xtiled, you can just go look at the polygon class, the line class, and, pull those methods out if you want. And I put in there, too, I put in the comments the links that that code came from, just so, like, if somebody comes by and they find an issue or asks a question,
they can actually
of,
see
like,
what
why
you're
is this
using.
math working? I'd be like, I don't fucking know, man. Go read that link. Somebody in, like, 1985 posted a web page. It's weird to see a webpage like dated like 1985, 1989 or something, and it's like, wow. Okay.
Math is forever.
But then like people over time, update to that. News this week. We haven't done Zynga news in a while.
Oh dear.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I don't think we have. Zynga's chief security officer resigned. Now he's not listed as one of their, what do they call them, C-level executives. So Zynga's not acknowledging that he's quit. So and because he's not listed as their C-level executives, they don't have to report to the SEC. But if he has left, it marks like the 12th executive to have left Zynga since their earnings call of just like total dog shit. Yeah.
I don't know.
So the thing is, and I've got an article here too to talk a little bit more about the lawsuit stuff with EA, but they may not last long enough as a company to see the outcome of the copyright infringement lawsuit of them ripping off SimCity.
That's interesting. The idea that they could be imploding
faster
than people can take them down. It's almost like, yes, there is a sense of justice in the universe, you know.
Yeah, cosmically balanced. So Zynga filed a thing and said, in their lawsuit, said to EA and the courts, EA's claims are bullshit, and then also, EA has been doing an illegal, non-hiring clause or something. So, apparently, I don't know, I couldn't get the, like, what's the text of the clause, that was there, but they filed a counterclaim to EA that we believe an anti-competitive and unlawful business practice, including legal threats and demands for no-hire agreements. So basically, like, I guess if you work at Zynga, EA's like, we will not hire you or something. Or if you can't leave EA to go to Zynga or something. I don't know. I don't have like the details of what EA is doing on that side. EA's response, which is hilarious, Zynga would be better served to try to hold on to the shrinking number of employees they've got rather than suing to acquire more.
Wow, that is just a big middle finger. But it may be that there are no good guys in this.
Well,
There are no good.
It is Bobby Kotick. No, Bobby's Activision.
The other one.
Yeah.
EA is still not clean, but they're cleaner than that.
Well, and they very, very well have something. And because they're in California, California has pretty stringent employment laws. I mean, if not, right, all these Silicon Valley companies would just have non-hire agreements. And, you work at Google. Now you can't go to Microsoft, Yahoo, or any other company that we, Apple, that we list. But instead, developers are publicly sometimes changing companies. So,
I don't know. If I was any company within that area, I was like, I don't want to buy Zynga's throwaways. You know why? Because all they can do is steal stuff and cause problems for my law department.
Well,
not necessarily.
Really. I know, but still.
They're game developers. They have made working game engines, and it is a critical, shorthanded career field.
In some cases, it's management decisions on Zynga's part that kind of lock them into doing that.
Besides, you don't know if they're a plant.
Well, if I was... It may not be that they're prevented legally from doing this, and I don't know, but I know if I walked into a, job offer and they had not just a non-compete, which, okay, that's normal. If it was a very specific non-compete, I would probably start having questions, what they expected to happen.
And, there's also things, too, of, like, non-competes don't hold up in several situations.
Yeah.
And, there's one, too, of, like, ability to learn and earn a living, right? Like, you can't, like, force me to sign a non-compete that makes me unable to earn a living anymore. And, like, if you're a game developer, I've got to go write games.
Yeah.
And games really have no jurisdiction. You sell them worldwide, so a regional restriction doesn't make any sense in terms of, like, games, right? Because they're sold worldwide. You compete everywhere. So it doesn't matter if I go work for a studio in Montreal or I'll go work for a studio next door. I'm still competing. So,
there's a little more barrier to you leaving, but...
It's just a hassle, and it's just like a implied threat, but... I mean, there's so many layoffs and hirings and changes in the game industry that I don't think... anybody go after that. This I thought was interesting. The the Game Festival, London Game Festival in October, they're going to have, like, one of their little side events is they got 5 game journalists, and I don't know their names, are going to make a game in a 48-hour game jam, and they're going to take 5 game developers and make them journalists who are going to, like, interview them, report on the scoops, and then review and rate their game. So it's kind of like a whole, like, yeah, like, this just seems like, this is like the basis of a sitcom.
This is a reality show.
No, this is perfect. This is people understanding both sides. This sounds... I'm wondering, and I'm not... Like, are there that many game journalists that have, like, the know-how to make a full game?
Well, I think they'll be, like, you know, grabbing a game maker or game salad type thing. And also they said that helping the journalists will receive help from their student developers at one of the universities, so they'll mainly be, like, design, I guess.
Yeah.
Which, that really puts the money where their mouth is on the game journalists, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it'd be awesome if, like, Yahtzee was one of these, because he's constantly, like, complaining what's bad design in games, and they should just...
Isn't he working on a game? Isn't there someone who's...
I don't think he's working on a game. He writes books, doesn't he?
I don't know. There's some game journalist.
Oh, wait. No, yeah, he is. He started, like, a platformer or something. You're right.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard anything from him since that one, like, announcement.
Yeah, I just wonder how much crossover there is, and of course developers doing game journalism, it's like...
I mean, quite a bit. Like, I know from some of the podcasts and stuff that I listen to, when they will interview guys, they will talk about, like, you know, so how is it now that you've left, you know, the world of journalism and you're in development, you know, and all of that. And it makes sense. It makes a certain degree of sense of, like, people who are attracted to games on one way or the other, you know.
I mean, I guess it's along the same lines of a lot of people who are talking heads on the news have experience in politics or whatever. Right. So, you know, they're crossing that line back and forth.
Big news this week. Dr. Ray and Dr. Greg retired. The heads of BioWare. The founders of BioWare, the studio, and then now the label inside EA. You know, some people have mentioned, and so we've already sold Levi. He's doing the test game and playing with the polygon collision detection. You know, some people have pointed out that this announcement comes pretty close to the mark of 5 years after being absorbed by EA. And that there may have been some clause that you can't leave before this, or something like that. You know, that kept them there, or you know, even worse, some form of, and from their letters, what I'm about to talk about, I don't think so at all. Some form of like EA wants them gone now, so they can fully absorb BioWare, you know, and they've done the transition. I think there may be no truth to either, but I don't think there's any EA pushing them out. I think this is them leaving. Now, Dr. Ray, in his letter, has said basically he's leaving to go form social entrepreneurism company or investment, you know, so to go and invest in not necessarily charities, but companies solving you know, social issues and things like that, and getting involved in that. And he seems pretty fairly, like, behind this of, like, this is what we're going to do. Wife and I give you these charities, you know, this is passionate. I set out to become a doctor, and I became a doctor, and, you know, and then I did, like, this game thing, and I did that, and I've mastered this, and now it's like, you know, I want to go on to the next bigger thing for me, and that's, you know, changing the world for the better, and helping things out.
What Bill Gates did, except I'm assuming on a smaller
if
we set him off into a small country with his current amount of money, I'm pretty certain that country would become the leading of whatever he wanted it to.
But the other one, Dr. Greg. Now, what you understand is Greg was the one behind the Star Wars MMO. That they live in Montreal, they live in Canada. I don't know if they both live in Montreal, but they live in Canada. Families in Canada. For like a year and a half, he moved to Austin to oversee the final year of production of the MMO.
Yeah.
He also oversaw and handled the Mass Effect 3 game. That was his as well. So you're talking back to back, right? Not failures is a strong word, but not critical fan reception. You know, you had the whole ending debacle with Mass Effect 3, and you've got, you know, the whole debacle of the Star Wars MMO. It's already going free to play. EA's probably like, oh, we fucking making our money out of this, you know.
Part of that may just be, why are you challenging WoW? You know. Like,
yeah, and there's a lot of like,
there's nothing you could have done.
yeah, there's questions of like, come on guys, what do you think you were doing? But you know, from the other side of like, you know, Star Wars property, it's a no-brainer, you know, and all of that. But his second paragraph, man, like, I'll read a little bit of it here. After nearly 20 years working at Bioware, I've decided it's time to move on and pursue something new. This decision isn't without significant pain and regret, but it's also something I know I need to do for myself and my family. I've reached an unexpected point in my life where I no longer have the passion that I once did for the company, for the games, and for the challenge of creation. Right?
Wow, that's...
I'm done with all of y'all. Peace.
That's fuck you industry.
Drop the microphone, walk
my
off.
Dreams. You know?
you know
what he's gonna do?
Name
for
me an industry that does not do that.
You know what
humans
he's gonna do?
suck.
You know what Dr. Greg is going to do? Travel the world drinking beer.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing it as a show. He's doing
seriously?
it. Yes. Crafted beer or the crafted beer, the beer diaries. The beer diaries. Now apparently he is a big beer connoisseur, and I have heard that from other sources of like, yeah, this isn't new for him. Like he's into the whole like microbrews and beer and all that, but yeah, his immediate plans are to travel the world
and get drunk.
No, I'm sure like the whole point of craft beer is not necessarily to get, you know, completely smashed, but
first he'll write, he'll do his tastings and he'll get all his legit shit, and then he's gonna get rip-roaring drunk.
The Star Wars MMO drove Dr. Greg to drinking.
Well, I love that, like,
on YouTube.
The balance
and Twitter.
One guy is going to go travel the world as a beer connoisseur. The other one is going to be like charity,
social
entrepreneurship,
change the world for the better, bigger challenge. I'm energized, you know, to do this next thing.
The other one's like,
however, I give odds that Greg, in a few years, whenever. Couple of years will have to pass, I think, because there will probably be some agreements, right, of non-competitive and that kind of stuff, because at the level that he's at, when that wears off and he's had his drink and he's sobering back up, that there isn't Kickstarter, if that's still a thing then, or whatever is the Kickstarter method, there isn't, hey, I'm Dr. Greg and I'm ready to make a fucking game again and make a studio and keep it real, you know?
Well, I wonder if he was very involved in, you know, obviously Mass Effect 3, some of their bigger games, you know, what does that mean for games going,
and now
forward?
His involvement, I mean, if he probably wasn't making day-to-day call shots.
Right, but still.
He probably was the guy EA was like, this is a premier property and you need to oversee all of this and report back and keep it on track and, you know, so I mean, he's really, and given the nature of these guys, he probably was a buck stops here guy too, of like, accepting like, you know, this was on my watch, like, you know, this went wrong. This is not a fault of the team. This is my fault. And he will bring it all on himself, even if other people would disagree on both sides, EA and the team, you know, of like how much fault is his. But, yeah, that's kind of a shame on both sides. And, it reminds me that I really need to play Jade Empire that I've got sitting in my Steam queue.
Wow.
Don't you have it on the shelf upstairs?
Yes, I bought it on Xbox, but the classic Xbox.
Yeah.
But then it was on Steam sale for like $5, and I was like,
dear God.
That Xbox is a loud fucking fan.
Yes, it does.
And it works with the controller on Steam, and it'll probably play from my laptop. And with the big picture mode, I could just plug it into the TV in the bedroom. $4. There you go. Dr. Greg, $4 more. Drink one from me.
I don't think that $4 will cost.
Pour one out for Jade Empire.
I saw an Xbox for sale at the consignment sale today.
You didn't see any Super Nintendos, though, did you?
No, I saw a Nintendo 64.
That's something I gotta find out. I gotta ask the lazy web. I've Googled it, and it seems to be okay, but these,
like the Retro Duo?
like the Duo, actually, the Ret Console 3, the one that has the Sega Genesis dock as well.
Yeah.
Like the Genesis isn't up, it's like the only one that's doing Genesis. That isn't like 100% up to snuff. Like there's a lot of games like the Genesis that aren't emulating well, but like the Super Nintendo and the NES ones are like shit hot. Doing that, I don't know. And that's like $50.
Yeah, I mean,
those consoles are $50, which is cheaper than the fucking Super Nintendos.
It's a classic. I mean, it's a classic.
And the 3, the one that does the 3, has ports to support all the original controllers. So you don't have to use any custom or knockoff controllers. You can get the actual...
Well, I know the 2 uses SNES controllers, I think, for both. I may be wrong about that.
So the 3 has 2 sets of ports, or 3 sets of ports, 2 ports each, for 2 SNES, 2 NES, and 2 Genesis. And it comes with a Genesis wireless controller that I think works on all 3. So you could use it for all 3 if you wanted, but it's laid out like the Genesis. It's got the 3 buttons across.
Right.
Yeah. 6 buttons, I guess, across it, 3 up, 3 down, and the D-pad type thing. It looks like a Genesis controller. It's just wireless. But to me, if I can poke up the original controllers on these games, I think that's key if you're gonna go back and play some of these.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. And like I've talked about, there's a lot of SNES that I've missed. And SNES was a golden age of RPGs. So I kind of, I mean, right now I'm not into the new games. There's not many new games I'm interested in playing. And there are a lot of derivative big budget titles going on, and I'm happy to bounce around between indies and go back through, the SNES and NES catalog. And, plus on the Retro Duo or the other one, the Ret 3, I might have better luck connecting those to video devices and recording them.
Yes.
So I don't know. I just gotta find that on the web and just see what experiences are, on that. But we talked a little bit about this at lunch the other day, but Unity and the Wii U, Unity and Nintendo have inked some kind of deal. And it's still not clear to me after reading more on it what is significant or matters about this. Like, Unity is touting this as like the second coming of Jesus. And it sounds like...
Well, that sounds really weird, though, because I know they were touting like you could use Unity on 360 and PS3.
Yeah. So Unity has supported console platforms.
So this isn't
for a while now, including the Wii.
But you had to have a license, a dev kit and all that for it.
And I think this is the thing. It's like if you've got a publisher, you don't need the license. Like Nintendo's deal includes them to use Unity for the Wii U or something. But there's no talk of like any kind of Wii Shop supports indie game channel or Xbox Live indie games or anything open to anyone like that. So, I don't know that there's anything really significant here other than if you get a Wii dev kit, you can use Unity. Yeah. Which you could already, I think. So, or, like you could do that with the Wii, so I don't see why you couldn't do that with the Wii U shortly. The bigger story, I think, is that Nintendo has a license to use Unity internally, which is kind of weird, because you'd think Nintendo would just have its own frameworks and engines at this point, and that, like there's the Mario Brothers framework, and you're not going to port that to Unity or something like that. You're just going to do that. But maybe it's a mess internally, and the idea is appealing. to get that out and do that. So I don't know what a whole lot to make of that story. Maybe more will come of that as the Wii launches, Wii U. There's a big long article. I read about half of this, basically talking about funding, and it's written from the former Ubisoft associate producer guy, and it's like, hey, is there an alternate funding method for games that isn't the publisher model? And punchline is, of course, he's saying no to that. And with the alternate funding model they look at is project-based funding, which is kind of how films are done. And it's basically fucking the housing market derivatives for games. So instead of you, like, backing a game, I back this project, okay? Here's the money to go do this project, and I'll get it when it's done. Versus the current publisher model of we control the milestones, and the publishers have a lot of creative control in the process, just to the way that the money gets dealt out. The film industry kind of backs a film, and then gets the film when it's done, and doesn't have a whole lot of input on the project as it gets made. And there aren't these milestones. There's basically like, here's how much money you think it's going to take to make the film. Here's the money to go make that. Sometimes there's a point where they're over budget, and they try to get more budget or something like that, and there's a renegotiation. But for the most part, they're like, okay, here's $30 million, go make this film. And then they go and make and market the film for $30. And what they've started doing is, instead of like you back one film, they take 10 films, bundle them together, and then you back 5% across these 10 films. So it's a housing market shit. It's what crashed the economy. So
I don't know, that could go either way, because if you're bundling it on the side of people who are selling instead of like a mutual fund model, where the people who are funding it are saying they're going to divide up
no.
ownership.
So somebody's making a package of 10 films,
yeah.
And then you're investing in those 10 films as a package. And God, the guys in there talking about like, this is better because, you can invest according to your risk profile. Like mutual fund managers could invest in, a film. And
seems like that in that case, the bundling needs to be done on the other side of the equation.
Yeah.
On the investor side rather than the...
But it basically, so he goes on and has a bunch of reasons of why that wouldn't work for games, and then comes up with a list of arguable bullshit of how that's worse for the developers, and that they would somehow get less money or something to make their game in this scenario, and all these other things would just be worse. And it's like, well, generally what happens is you've got these 10 games, you have a management agency across the 10 that is a skeleton crew, so you don't want to lose a lot of overhead.
Right.
So they really just like check in on each of the 10. Here's your money, go make your game. Now you need to deliver, and we follow up the legal contracts and get status reports. But they're not day to day, every step of the day milestone release. Oh, now the publishers decided you need to have a demo at E3. That wasn't in the contract, but since we're having a dispute, quote unquote, we're withholding the milestone payment. Yeah. And if you don't make them happy, you don't get the milestone payment, and then you can sue if you want, but at that point, you're collapsing, and the studio knows that, the studio knows that the shop will collapse and lose the ability to finish the project, and then there'll be a clause to say, well, you've lost a lot of developers and you can't materially produce this, so, we own it. And, I think the article is, the double speak in the article is kind of thick. And that even like when they talk about the problems with the studios, like he was talking about in this one section for the milestones, and that the publisher gets all the IP, when they're done, that this prompts the independent developers to complain that their creativity is being restricted and that their work is transformed into mere execution. And the way that's just phrased, of like, you know, these independent developers to complain about this, but when he talks about the publishers, like he talks about like how they have to mitigate their risk and they're paying for all this money, obviously, you know, and so they have all the risk here, you know, and they're taking on it, and so they justly get, you know, the IP and everything as their insurance and things like that, and so it's what you would expect somebody from Ubisoft to write.
Yeah, exactly, because, you know, the independent risk is that they no longer have a studio.
Yes. They're out of a job. So, which you get to go on and screw over your next indie studio. I'm gonna get to the punchline on this one. There's an article on indie for Kickstarter by guys that did a Kickstarter on Keith Bergen wrote it. I forget. What was this Kickstarter? Oh, they did 2 games. They did Aurora the Golden Prince, which I think was successful, and Star Command, or Aurora the Golden Prince wasn't successful and Star Command was, or something. Anyway, they did 2. They got some tips, and if you've been listening to this podcast, it's going to sound real familiar. Keep it simple and direct in your pitch. Wait until you have something to show. Have a demo. Where have I said that before? Shoot for a smaller amount. Now, they get a little dicey here because they say, like, figure out what your minimum is and then have that, and that's what you ask for. They're coming from the prospect of you're making the game anyway. So these are like your awesome upsell add-on things. Have that. Don't get everything you want. Figure out what you would cut is really what they're saying. They're not saying, hey, lie because Kickstarters always get overfunded and meet the goal to get the money first. Consider not trying to be funny. And don't get discouraged if you don't make it. Like they launched it and then they made it again. More Kickstarter news. Obsidian, which has an insanely popular Kickstarter that we talked about last week, and I said that was a good thing. It's bringing more to the service.
Yeah.
Accuses publishers of abusing Kickstarter, and basically they publicly revealed in an update that a publisher went to Obsidian before they did their Kickstarter and said, hey, well, we have this idea for a game. We want you, Obsidian, to go pitch this game as your studio on Kickstarter, and then we'll publish it. And, you know, it's funny because he's like, they wanted to keep the IP and everything. And they were going to kick in some more money too, but, like, the publishers wanted to use the studio as like, oh, it's authentic and grassroots marketing, and they're doing something the publishers won't let them do.
Obsidian was the company that announced like months ago that they were considering something and on their forums. So
so some scrupulous publishers out there, and so they may be out there. There may be these games or like these studios where they just like, yeah, we want you, studio of record, to talk about this game idea that we have.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I've said before about Kickstarter. It's this model that has started out, and it appears to be like completely democratizing everything, and to some extent it does. But there's always ways that can be abused. And
well, on that note, Kickstarter wants you to know that Kickstarter is not a store. Which bullshit. Kickstarter is a place for pre-orders.
Yeah,
you know, as hard, and they don't want to be viewed as pre-orders. They want to be viewed as starting these awesome projects and bootstrapping. But it's like, I have no investment in these companies.
But I think the restriction here, because I'm going into the rest of the article because I think I saw this earlier, it's limitations placed on hardware and design projects.
Well, okay, so their creators must, this is on all projects,
Okay.
Creators must talk about risks and challenges.
That's right.
So the creators are supposed to come out and tell you that what challenges the project faces, what are the what are the hurdles, what are the problems with doing this, and what qualifies them to overcome it. Which sounds a little resume bullshitty. Yeah. And that's all you're going to get is resume bullshit answers in that box. I don't think you're going to get any. I don't think that's going to add any significant weight to, oh, I got to answer that question now, so I won't put my half-baked idea on Kickstarter. I don't see that stopping anyone from posting on Kickstarter.
Although, if I went in there and I saw an answer that is, the interview BS response to the, interview BS question, that's completely out of touch with reality, that's probably going to clue me in right away that
But I think that's so secondary to what the project is and what the project has shown you.
I think it is, too, but I think it's just like...
Like, what are you going to say on a game?
Well...
I write good code.
Well, it does show how realistic... I can draw
in the GIMP. I know 3D Studio Max.
I think the idea is the more... It's not necessarily that this is the solution. It's just the more barriers to entry they throw up, the harder it is for crap to get through.
Now, the other thing is that this is specific to the hardware and product design.
This is what I was thinking of.
Is that product simulations are prohibited. Projects cannot simulate events to demonstrate what the product might do in the future. They can only show what it can do now. I think that's kind of a crock of shit. If you're asking for people to make something, like, how do you...
Yeah.
Like, here's my prototype, and then, when this gets up to production, it should look like this. And product renderings are prohibited. Product images must be photos of the prototype as it exists.
On the other hand, consider, like, the Ouya.
Well, that's the other thing. The Ouya is in the video games category.
It is in the video...
So what kind of restrictions... Because the Ouya violates both of these, all right? It did. And we've talked about it's got a high degree of not delivering on. I mean, its controller was a mock-up in Photoshop. There was no controller existing. But it was in another category. So are they going to allow that to skirt?
Well, my question there is, there's two possibilities I see for that. And one of them is that this is where they're seeing the most abuse, is these two categories, just based on what they are. Which isn't surprising considering that I think design is one of the most popular categories, I believe.
Yeah, these, I don't know if the hardware is as popular, but product design is, because I think that's where you find, like, your Apple stuff, your
very
Pebble
particular
Watch,
type of
and
project.
your iPhone docks and all that junk are in that one, which, ironically, that aluminum heavy dock, right?
Yeah.
The whole, like, hey, it's a heavy dock that got, like, a serious shitload of $1 million funding for, like, just you don't have to do it. Is fucked now. It hasn't shipped, and the iPhone 5 has a new power adapter.
Yep.
It's not going to work.
Instantly, let me come back to that, but I think the second possibility is this is like, what happens... Okay, we've got this very successful model. What happens when we reach down from the heavens and start, muddying things up? Does this, do people revolt? Do they deal with it?
Well, I mean, does this push these products off a Kickstarter?
Exactly.
Because, like, if you can't show me the renderings of what the final thing's going to look like, I want to see the prototype.
Yeah, and I wonder how...
The prototype could be made of fucking wood for all I care. It's like, I got this prototype up, now I need the money to do the manufacturing run to get it made out of aluminum. Okay, I get it. I understand that. You're not going to get, like, 2 aluminum bodies made... for a Kickstarter video. That's,
I suspect, and if you read between the lines, it's almost like if you have the money to get good quality renderings done, a good quality prototype, all this other stuff, then in theory you probably don't need Kickstarter. Let's get back to, the average indie, maker guy who's working out of his garage. That's that type of thing. But coming back to, actually, I already forgot what.
There was another rule that offering multiple quantities, again, this applies to hardware and product design, is prohibited. Because they don't want to be looked at as sales. And it's like, that pisses me off too. Because, okay, let's say I like the Pebble watch.
Right.
I want to get one for me and my wife. I'm going to have to go make another fake damn account to get one for me and my wife? Like, you've stopped nothing.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to go in, and she's going to have to bid, and I'm going to have to bid, versus being able just to place one bid for both. Or you'll just have, like, overbid, and we'll send you a second one.
Yeah. Well, I remember what I was going to come back to. I think that maybe the iPhone dock being screwed. The challenges may be an attempt to remind it's not for the project founders, it's for the bidders to remember that don't get pissed off if this doesn't work. Like, no, I see what you're saying. I think, like I said,
I don't think this is going to really do anything except give the perception that Kickstarter is doing something. Because if you go to a project, right? So I went to the project because I wanted to see the new section, which is near the frickin' bottom. Wait. Oh, okay. I guess that wasn't a... I need to go to Discover Recently Launched. Here we go. Because they're already in effect.
Yeah.
Risks and challenges. This is on something we probably won't talk about. No, it's a hip-hop project, concept album of Nickelodeon and games and Disney hip-hop album, whatever.
What?
Right? His risks and challenges. He's qualified to do this because there won't be much of a posed challenge, but I will illustrate the best I can. Getting the artist together to animate the music video and distributing the finished album. That's what you get in that box. That's useless. Now they got a link here. Learn about accountability on Kickstarter. And this is where all this shit breaks down. Because they start the phrases of like, the project, you go to their accountability FAQ, and it's like, who's responsible for delivering on the project? And it's like, the creator is. Kickstarter guarantees nothing. How do backers know if they will follow through? Well, we ask them to tell you really, really hard. And, they say something in here, that they ask for, like, manufacturing plans now, too, as well. Just to make sure, like, they've researched what it's going to cost for the hardware. What do they do if... What creators should, if they're having problems, they should update, basically, and tell people. Is a creator legally obligated... This is the interesting spin. Is the creator legally obligated to fulfill the promises of their project? Yes. Now, see, that answer alone is kind of belying their whole, like, things may fail, things, may not work. That's like saying 100% of the time successful projects deliver what they promised. And it's like, that's not going to be possible. Just by the nature of what Kickstarter is, this isn't possible. And it's funny because they give it this yes. Yes, that's legally responsible. And then the rest of this answer detracts from that yes, and that Kickstarter's terms of use requires their terms of use. Yeah. Okay, so we're backing down a level of legality here. That requires them to fulfill rewards, or refund any backer whose reward they cannot fulfill. They give a screenshot of, like, creators see this scary text before they submit their project. We crafted these terms to be a legal requirement, and to give backers a recourse if they don't. We hope the backers consider using this provision only in cases where they feel a creator has not made a good effort to fulfill the project. So, in between the lines, it's like, it's legally binding if you decide to sue and make it so. But Kickstarter is going to do nothing.
Well, I think in this case, because you're dabbling in, funding projects, you're dabbling in something that's inherently risky, they have to play both sides of, the game to, for good PR. But I think all of this, if you look at it, they're kind of where eBay was as it started maturing. Like when it started out, the idea was you enlist, you can go find a bunch of stuff in your attic, you can sell it, maybe you'll get rich, or, you'll get some money from it. Later on, you have, companies going in using it as a method of distribution, using a bulk lister,
right?
eBay stores, things like that. And, they have to move beyond just straight up terms of service and basic rules and, the reputation system to actually having a full, safe harbor program to deal with. So, I don't know, like it's Kickstarter maturing, and they may not live up to the original promise, just kind of like eBay.
Yeah, and the irony thing on all this too of like all this talk of we're not a store,
yeah,
is counter to all of this. They must ship and they must do all these things that they promise. Of like, well, that's how a store works. Funding startups would say, hey, sometimes things don't work out, and if you thought you were frauded, we'll help on fraud with some terms, but understand, like, make sure it looks like they've got a prototype, and, we'll try to make sure that they have thought things through, but some things may just not work out.
I don't know if that plays to the masses, though. I mean, that
I know it doesn't play to the masses, but you have all these Kickstarters asking for $10,000 claiming to make an MMO.
Right, but if you, like, as a consumer,
that's not going to get delivered.
If you're used to buying something, you're used to the concept of buying something. The whole idea of, like, I don't know if I'm going to get anything out of this or not, it's not the model you're used to.
I know it's
so
not.
They have to
that's
play
what I'm saying.
That side.
But they're trying to, they're not playing that side. They're trying to say we're not a store.
Right.
That's what the whole blog post is. We are not a store. That's the name of it.
I don't know. Like I said,
Kickstarter is not a store. You are not here to buy things off of Kickstarter. It is not an e-shop for you. It's not a retailer. But then all of their legalese and their FAQs reinforce this. No, feel comfortable in here like a store.
Like I said, the Kickstarter right now is so much of it is about perception, and where it actually ends up is going to be interesting. It will be interesting to see the first major game project that fails. What's the response going to be?
Speaking of game projects, first one up, Sword of Fargirl 2. I think I skipped over this last week. And I came back to it. I think they changed their video. I'm not 100% on that. I usually look at like the last few just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. And they've got quite a bit of gameplay video up. They've only got 12,000 of their 50,000, but I guess Fargirl was a Commodore 64 game, and then they ported it to iPad, and it's doing fairly well on iPad, and now they want to make an actual true sequel to... It's funny because he describes his game as a roguelike, which it came out before Rogue. Yeah.
You gotta use the lingo.
Isn't that sad? Yeah. Isn't that sad? Isn't that like, at some moment, like he's vomiting off screen of like having to describe his game that influenced another game that gave the name for the genre?
I think it's better, and I hate to say this, I have more respect for him doing that than being a dick about it and going, no, I came up with it. Oh, I was first.
Yeah. He is really good throughout the entire video.
I would feel more comfortable supporting a guy like that.
The next one up is Sea Lark. I don't understand this one.
Sea Lark?
Lark. I don't understand this one. It launched, it's been on a week. It's got $30,000. It had a $5,000 goal. An adventure about fish, love, and dire consequences. The only thing that you see on this game is this video of this girl throwing a fish hook and some, I know we're not playing the audio, but some Final Fantasy type music is playing. Retro 8-bit, there, or 16-bit, in the background. And, yeah, this thing launched crazy. There's gotta be a story to this, I don't know. Like, the person launching this, has to
have some
following or something. The art
like
style looks
stock.
The art style looks great. I don't diss it for that. You know, but it's just some static screen mock-ups in pixel art style. Doesn't explain to me why it hit $30,000. That's their last stretch goal. Like, they're gonna have to announce new stretch goals now. Black Space. This is a ways to go. So they're looking for 350,000. They've got 47,000. This launched Tuesday. So I don't know. They're off to a good start though. So they you know, again, it's got the woman. She's listed as producer credit, and they open with her and they have her do a lot of voiceover, but like the way she's reading like some of the lines is very clearly like a disconnect between.
What about the other guys on here? Are they doing the same thing?
No, they're very much like, yep, you're the developer, yep, you're the artist, yep. And it's like when she's talking about,
be good in front of the camera or good reading off of cue cards.
No, let me finish here. So she's talking about like in this scene in particular about like controlling the thing, controlling, you know, your platform, and you will use the W, S, A, and D keys like a typical first-person shooter, and you will be able to move the right mouse button, and those pauses are like how she's saying it. Like she's having to actually stop, and it's like, gamers, it doesn't come off like you play games or evolving games, because that's not the way you would describe, you know, first-person shooting mechanics, you know, and view controls. And she narrates quite a bit of what's going on.
Okay, yeah, that might be.
But that aside, that questionable, like, is she on there, you know, maybe she's doing stuff for the game, but she's been chosen as the company face because she's female. And it plays poorly.
Yeah.
Can come off bad. That aside, this is an RTS in 3D, and you're actually on an asteroid, and you literally destroy the surface, mine the asteroid, and I guess can like tunnel holes through to the other bases and stuff. So you are in 3D, but you are on this spherical plane. So later in the video, when they get to like some of the invading forces, they show like, you know, coming up over the hill.
It is pretty cool. The graphics are.
The graphics are pretty good. Like, yeah, here's like coming up over the hill with the invaders, and
if only there was something hidden on the inside of the planet that only one person could see.
Where are you going with that? I don't know.
The Peter Molyneux game.
Oh,
I don't know. That was the first thing I thought of when you started talking about mining on a planet.
So
ignore random troll.
It looks pretty interesting, and that's Black Space. The last one, it was a slow week, so I gotta what the fuck up. I'm gonna refresh this just to see if it changed. Nope.
Is that Duke Nukem in that picture?
Yes. This is 3D Realms wanting to do a Duke Nukem mobile game, and they launched 2 days ago. $45,000. They've only raised 108 backers.
Wow.
Yes. There's no love for the Duke.
Well, okay.
That is outplayed.
The whole Duke Nukem Forever thing killed it, but also I think once you get past like 25, the appeal of Duke Nukem.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, that I no longer find that funny.
Nor do we want that mobile.
Nope. Because I don't know how a 3D game like that would work.
So this makes me wonder if this isn't one of those publisher, hey 3D Realms, can you show this for us? Because you've got a name. If we go out there, it'll seem like it's cheesy and awful.
Nah.
The comment that they get, I love the comment that they get. Happy to be the first backer. It's the only comment, by the way. But how about some rewards that include some of your existing Android and iPhone games? Like, I've backed this, but I'm gonna cancel unless you, like, make sweeten this pot a little bit, because I don't want to play the Duke Nukem game. Give me the other games that you got.
Or maybe they're just not sure if they're going to get the game. They want, I want something up front. Which is harsh.
And the thing is, there's also, like, $10, get the game, okay, at $10. Estimated delivery is January 2013, right around the corner.
Wow. Well, mobile game. I mean, it's not like...
But you also get $10 worth of in-game Duke cash. So it sounds like monetized, free-to-play.
I have said, though, before, like, with Kickstarter, I want to see the first big-name project that doesn't make it, and then the first big-name project that fails, because that defines, like, once that happens, stuff has gotten real.
I think
we know where this thing is. Ouya, it's big-name project, but it's not
even if the Ouya ships...
I don't think there's capital behind it like there is 3D Realms.
When it ships, I must have skipped over a Valve article. I think I did.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Like when you're not talking about the one that doesn't make, you're talking about the one that fails.
There was a Valve article, and I think I skipped it, or I must have accidentally. Oh, here it is. Yeah, Valve has a hardware beta in 2013 for making Steam games more fun in your living room. Just fucking admit it, guys. But, yeah, if that's launching...
I'm betting
at the time the Ouya's coming out...
Yeah, it's over.
It's done. I think this podcast is done. I think we're out. I think it's over. Let's call it a night. Thank you, everyone who tunes into the live stream and watches there. Thank you if you watch us on YouTube. Know that you don't get the outtakes on YouTube. That only comes to our loyal listeners who listen to the audio version. Stay tuned for outtakes after the music.